Good morning. Today we find ourselves in Exodus chapter 16. A quick recap. Pharaoh let them go. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt into the Red Sea, but then Pharaoh changed his mind and chased after them with a great army. So God parted the Red Sea, and Moses and the Israelites safely crossed. Pharaoh and his men, however, were caught in the waters and drowned. Now, safely on the other side, the Israelites are complaining. In verse 2, we see that the whole congregation of Israelites are complaining specifically to Moses and his right-hand man, Aaron. What does this mean? Well, it basically means that all of the Israelites who have been freed, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of them, are all of one mind, and that one large collective very, very loud and noisy mind is complaining nonstop. In fact, in verse 3, the Israelites very poetically say, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you," that is, Moses and Aaron, "have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." So basically, they're saying, Moses, God is going to kill us here, and he's not going to do it nicely. He's going to starve us to death. Why couldn't he just kill us, even though we are his chosen people, when we were back in Egypt? Yes, they were slaves, but they were sitting by their flesh pots, or rather, pots that were covered in animal skins and flesh, which would have been filled with food and water, and they had enough bread to eat. That, the Israelites are now saying, is more precious than freedom. Food. Very basic human need. Verse 4, "Then the Lord said to Moses, I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you." This cannot happen, technically. If this were to happen, it would be a miracle. And we know later that this bread from heaven is known as manna. It appears several times in the Old Testament. Jesus references it in the New Testament. It is referenced 3 times in the Quran, which is the holy book of the Muslim people. And even Greek and Roman medicine of later years would reference manna as an ingredient for certain rare medicines. However, to this day, we don't know exactly what manna is. This is a miracle that happened only now, when the Israelites were wandering through the wilderness. God, however, is going to test them, and says so. He says that he is going to rain bread from heaven down upon the Israelites, but they may only gather enough for that day. Basically, they are to eat only what they need. They are not to hoard it. They are not to carry it. God will provide each day, and the Israelites must trust that God will provide for them each day in this way. In verse 5, there's a little extra caveat. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on other days. Now, if we remember from the story of creation, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day, you were meant to rest. So God is providing enough food for both the 6th day and the 7th day, or Sabbath. Moses and Aaron tell the people this, but then they also tell them in verse 7, "If you are complaining against us, you are complaining against the Lord." They are aligning themselves with God. If you say nay to me, you're saying nay to him. This is a very strong and powerful position to take. And if the people don't believe them, well, then they have no belief in the authority of God himself. This is reiterated a couple of times. And then Moses says, at the end of verse 8, "What are we? That is the question. What are we to question God? What are we to not accept his divine plan? Yes, he delivered us out of Egypt, but will he not also provide? What are we to think that he is not powerful enough to do this? Moving on, they're still complaining, and God decides to do something about it. He decides to manifest himself. Now remember, earlier in Exodus, God spoke to Moses from a burning bush, and now he is doing something just as wondrous. In verse 10, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. Now, at first glance, this doesn't seem to be much. Yes, there's a cloud in the sky. It's miraculous, but it is not potentially divine status. But think where they are. They are in the wilderness. They are in the desert. There is no water. For a cloud to form, there needs to be water in the atmosphere and exact conditions for the water droplets to condense and form a cloud, and yet not condense enough to rain. So for there to be a cloud is truly a miracle. God is in the atmosphere. He's in the water droplets that should not even be there. He is in a beautiful cloud in a land of complete desolation. The Lord speaks to Moses from the cloud. He says that he has heard the complaining. After all, the congregation is very large and very loud. They keep on repeating this throughout Exodus 16, verses 2 through 15, just to get this point to hit home. They are complaining, the Israelites, and they will not let up. And God promises something more than bread in the morning. He says, at twilight you shall eat meat. And then in verse 13 we see this meat. In the evening quails came up and covered the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. Quails do not appear in the desert. Quails do not appear in the wilderness. This is truly a miracle. God is providing for his people. In verse 14, we have the description of manna. Manna has been compared to ambrosia, which is the drink of the gods in ancient Greece and Rome. This is a substance directly from the divine hand, and thus is divine food in and of itself. Verse 14, when the layer of dew lifted, and there is no water for there to be dew in this wilderness. There on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. This is a desert. This is a wilderness. In their winters, they do not have frost. They do not have snow. This is an impossibility, which makes the manna here in verse 14 even more miraculous. Finally, verse 15. When the Israelites saw this frost, this bread, this manna, they said to one another, what is it? They don't know. They've never seen anything like this before. It is beyond their very comprehension. For they did not know what it was. Moses, their leader, said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. Amen. What are we to make of this story? Well, it's full of miracles. Wonderful, beautiful miracles that once you understand, you can fully appreciate. But it's more than that. Think of the Israelites. They have just crossed the Red Sea. They will be so annoying and so disrespectful to God that he will make them wander through the wilderness for 40 years. Moses, their leader, won't even get to reach the Holy Land. They just complain and complain and complain, and they do the wrong thing again and again and again, practically on purpose. I believe next week we have the story of the golden calf. The Lord brought them out of Egypt, and yet it wasn't enough for the Israelites. The Lord wasn't enough. They needed a golden calf to bow down to physically and worship. This is just a taste of that sort of disobedience which is to come. But still, the Lord provides. The Israelites are hungry. They are complaining. They are being very loud and very poetic in their complaints. And yet God gives them manna and gives them quail. Later, when they are thirsty, God gives them water, even when Moses doesn't follow his instructions. Whatever the Israelite people truly need, God provides for them. In Exodus, they are rarely, if ever, thankful. But that does not matter to God as much as he would like it. What matters is that they are his people. What matters is that he loves them, even when they fail to recognize him as their one and highest God. This has not changed over the several thousands of years since the Israelites wandered through the desert. We are God's people because we are followers of Christ, and we must trust that God will provide for us during our time of need. Now, often we think to ourselves, God, why aren't you helping me with this? My mortgage I can't pay it. Why aren't you helping? You look for signs and you don't see God. But God is always there. He is always present. In the most desperate of circumstances, God shows his face. Is not starvation in the wilderness the most desperate of circumstances? Is not slavery in Egypt, when all the sons of the Israelite people are being drowned, the most severe and deadly of circumstances and need? Those are the times when God shows himself. And yet, even to the Israelites, who are freed from Pharaoh, who cross the Red Sea without getting their feet wet, who are given manna to eat in the mornings and quail in the evenings, even with these signs, they do not recognize the power of God. It is only later, when these stories were written down into what is now known as the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, that the Israelites, that the Hebrews, that the Jews, that the followers of Jesus were able to recognize these miracles. It was only then, after the fact, that they could see God working in every tiny detail. And so too is it with us. During our times of trouble, it is so difficult to see God. And yet a week out, a year, a decade, we can look back and think and truly recognize that God was there working within our lives all along. So in these difficult times, I implore you not to lose faith. God is with us. Christ is with us. We're just too close to the problem to truly recognize them. Amen.